right, so
Thank you very much. I uploaded. If you want to send me another screen share, I can try it again because I checked like for updates and all that, so it restarted. If you want to try me again.
I think we should probably just go forward with where we're at. I mean, we're already.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, because we've burned through quite a bit of time.
Okay, no problem.
You want to try it? I mean, if it'll work, it'll.
Well, again, it's up to you.
Let's do it one time.
All right,
I'm gonna call. Let's do it on air. See if this works.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Calling you, and then just in turn, you know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there you go. Well, there you go. That worked. That worked. All
right, I'm gonna hang up on you. There you go. Perfect.
All right.
So we're just gonna run you through YouTube. Good.
Perfect. There. That was all we needed to do, right? That's
it.
Isn't that funny how that happens? Hold on. Let me
Crazy.
Let me exit this real quick. Give me 1 second, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah, I can see your little face in the top, but I can't see your.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be like it's kind of a one-way-ish thing, but it is what it is.
No problem.
All right, let me do this, and then I'm gonna transition. Okay, we're rocking and rolling now. Okay.
Technology's wonderful.
I know, right? I know. Let's do it. All right, guys. Fritz, you want to get things started, my friend?
Well, I mean, again, yeah. Welcome everybody to the show. It's Coast to Coast. You're in the Lions Den. We've got Jason Fox in with us today. Thank you, by the way, Jason. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see him in our stream there. He's branch manager, mortgage advisor for People's Home Equity, and a good friend of ours, and an outstanding mortgage professional. Someone we were very excited to have on and speak with. So thank you, Jason, for being on with us. Certainly do appreciate it. Now, I've got, you've gone even a step further than most of our guests. You've actually given me some prepared material, like, hey, these are the items I want to cover.
Nice.
So we're prepared. We're ready to go. Jason is on top of it. He knows exactly what he's doing. So he gave us some really good discussion topics here, things we're going to touch on. Okay. And as I was saying a little bit earlier in the open, we're going to try to avoid all the discction about Alex Smith. And Kirk
Alex
Cousins.
Smith. Is that on the?
It's not on the list, but no matter what, when you get if you're and Jason's local here. He's in Maryland, right? So he'll back us up on this. You can't get in a car. You can't turn on a radio. You can't have any exposure to any media at this moment in this week without that being the number one story. Right? So it's bizarre.
That is the case. So let me ask you: Are you for Alex Smith, or are you for the trade, or not? Where are you at?
Well, I'm a Ravens fan, so
nice.
I'm a Raiders and a Ravens fan. So Alex Smith doesn't mean anything to me, but I know a lot of Redskins fans are counting on going to the Super Bowl because they made this one trade. So,
hey, I think the Redskins fans though are counting on going to the Super Bowl every year though, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And never actually do, but so how long have you been a Ravens fan?
I'd say for about 5 or 6 years now. So, I liked Ray Lewis. I liked what he did. I love the aggressive defense, and it just kind of draws you into any team with a great defense. It's hard not to like them.
You know what's interesting? So I was at the Super Bowl when I was out at the Super Bowl when they played the 49ers. I think it was 5 years ago now at this point. So you were still, and it's one of those things where that was such a magical thing for Ray. You know what I mean? Like to really have him kind of go out on top like that. I mean, that was such a magical thing. Did you? I mean, I'm sure you watched the game, but when Ray was there was just something different. You know what I mean? I mean, do you feel the same way?
I mean, the intro dance. Yeah, the intro dance alone was enough to get you hyped up for 3 quarters.
I know.
I mean, the whole place would just go insanely wild with that crazy little dance he came up with. And throwing the grass in the air. It was just.
It's called the Icky Shuffle. What is it? The Icky Shuffle?
I don't think so.
But it was. There's nothing else like it. Nobody else does anything like it. So it is really cool. It was, and I've watched that video probably a million times in the morning. I play it for my son for the beginning of his football games. He's only 7, but I try to get him hyped up for the
There you
games.
go.
And that's the video I use, man. Old Ray Ray.
No, it's so I played. So he has a brother, Keon Lattimore, that he played running back, and I played with Keon when he was at Maryland. And it's one of those things to where I met Ray one time, and that dude, it's like his face is bigger than my helmet. It's just like everything about him is just so.
I actually met Ray Lewis and Deion Sanders in a mall in Florida.
Okay, how that? Okay, so he's Miami because he's Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was just doing some shopping, walking through the Boca Town Center Mall, and here comes a guy that it looks like the size of a mountain.
Yeah,
basically. And there's Deion, little, by the way, Deion Sanders, little tiny little child-sized Deion Sanders, which I probably shouldn't speak that way about him, but look, pretty much almost any person standing next to Ray Lewis is going to look like a child, and Deion certainly did. He did not disappoint in that way.
I think you've talked about football more on this show than you've ever talked about it in your life.
What do you mean?
I mean, because pre this show, we talk about football almost every week now. Mm-hmm. Pre this show, I don't think we've ever talked about football.
Well,
because Fritz and I have worked together for probably 5 years at this point, right? Yeah.
Yeah, going on 6. But okay, so here's the thing. Okay, it's a universal topic. I think for folks in our business, it just is one of those things that folks in our business discuss, right?
Yeah.
That and being that it's playoff time, Super Bowl time. I mean, it's far more relevant. It's far more topical. Now, after next week, when the Patriots win their Super Bowl, okay, when they cheat to win the Super Bowl this next one, okay.
Win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. After that, we probably won't talk football for some time. But now, I will say I do make a lot of comparisons with business to sports. That we do. That we've done a lot, and that I think we've done historically, because a lot of those same lessons, still apply. The lessons you learn in sports, can certainly apply to business, and football in a lot of ways is a good example of that. Part of that starts with my well-known hatred of any sort of participation trophy that's given to anyone. I don't believe you should ever receive a participation trophy. The trophy is for a winner, not for someone who participates.
Okay. Jason, what do you think of that? You think are you for participation trophies or no participation trophies? And I'm sure you were thinking it would be very sophisticated mortgage questions, but this is exactly.
I was all prepared. I wasn't prepared. I don't believe in them, but I started looking through some of my old bowling trophies when I moved a few years back, and I was like, I must have been the worst bowler ever because I had so many high handicap trophies. It was high handicap 1983. I'm like, I shouldn't have got a trophy for being the worst bowler out there, but I did. So, I'm not for them, but I guess I liked them back then.
Yeah, so I always think, if you're below the age of like 6 or 7, maybe 8, it's fine because you need to get some wins in your life. But after that, I think it's kind of all for one, and it's one for all and all for one, and you got to earn it.
Well, and that's my point.
If you teach everybody,
Well, I always think to myself, like, some people aren't going to be athletes, so you don't want to like beat them into the ground when they're 5.
Right. Well, but there's there's a big difference. And see, so here's my point, and this is good because it's relevant for how this ties into other aspects of life.
Yeah.
Okay. No, not everyone's an athlete, but to some extent, not everyone's an athlete, but the lessons you can learn from sports do apply in every other sense in your life. And children, when you're a child and you're playing organized sports, that's where you first learn these lessons. And the first lesson you learn, and the most important lesson you learn as a kid, that you should learn as a kid participating in these kind of sports, is hard work pays off. If you want to get the reward, you've got to do the work to be the best to earn the reward.
Correct.
So you don't just, you know what I'm saying? You don't just get that. No one's just going to give you something for showing up.
No.
Okay, you've got to work hard. And sports is really great because it teaches you that You can work as hard as you possibly can, do your absolute best, and still fail. You know, still fall short of the goal that you set for yourself. But that's okay, because that should be your motivation to continue to work hard and continue to try to be successful. So that's why I have, and I mean, this is we're way off topic here, but that's why I'm against participation trophies, because it sends a wrong message, particularly to a kid who's very young, okay, who really is learning these things for the first time in their life, that, you know, they're just going to get rewarded for showing up, and that's just never going to be the case. And what happens with those folks is they get older, they don't get rewarded for showing up anymore. Now they've got to actually compete, work hard, whatever. They don't have the ability to do it because they didn't have that set, you know, they didn't have that put into them as a kid.
The adversity.
You know?
Going through that adversity.
That's right.
And I agree 100%.
Yeah, they fold up like a chair, man.
Going through that adversity, I remember when, like, you call it like a come to Jesus meeting, right? Like going through that sort of toughness and kind of character building adversity is huge. I mean, I definitely agree with that. So let's get back. I know we want to get on top.
Yeah. Now we're going back to
Jason. Sorry, before we do that, well, who do you think's gonna win the Super Bowl? Are you Patriots? I think Patriots.
Patriots and the refs.
I think Patriots. It's not gonna be Patriots.
You know, the refs and the no. You know, I'm 41 now, and Brady, you know, he is 40, and I started watching that thing on Facebook, the watch video thing, and just seeing, you know, his work ethic, and I mean, the guy eats perfectly all the time, and you know, he's just that guy. And it's hard not, for being 40 years old, it's hard to not root for a guy who's 40 years old and everybody else on the field is 25. You know, and seeing him playing at the level he's playing at, it's hard for me not to want him to win again. You know.
Well, and what's interesting?
They do cheat a little.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting is you say that, right? And what's interesting and what I found is, and I actually am right in the middle of reading his TB12 book,
okay,
where he talks about his like planning method and his prep method and the way he goes about sort of doing things. And it's one of those things where it's like the man is just on top of stuff. You know what I mean? Like he just really is. Like the man is just on, like he is looking at it from such a unique scientific approach, like muscle pliability, right? Whereas like a lot of guys don't do that, where he is on the edge of a lot of the new sports and development stuff, to your point. And his work ethic's good.
And so here's where I'm going to put a bow on this. This is how I'm going to wrap this all up and lead us into our next topic, which is, I guarantee you that Tom Brady never once, ever in his life, got a participation trophy.
That's true. Now that's true.
Okay?
That's true.
Okay?
That's probably
and if you gave him one, he would have given it back to you and said, I didn't earn this. Okay.
All right, we're getting into the show. Right?
Now, let's talk about what our show is actually about, which is the appraisal management business, the mortgage industry, you know, ideas on, you know, talking to folks who we know are very successful, who have made themselves successful, and, you know, discussing some of those habits and things like that. That's really the range we're in. So I want to go over, Jason, you kind of sent a list here of questions, and I'm just going to jump right into these so we can kind of start the discussion on these, because these are really relevant. I think these are excellent questions. They're very relevant. And these are, I promise you, we didn't coordinate on these beforehand. You sent these to me unsolicited. But I will say this is a pretty good representation of the most common questions that I get asked, okay, that I'm asked. So I think you've done a great job in kind of summarizing these things. So I'm gonna to give you a big thumbs up on that. So I'm going to jump right in here. So first one you got on here is, what are common reasons an appraisal needs a reinspection? This is a great question. And just for those who may be listening who aren't necessarily familiar, so you can have a situation where, and when we say reinspection, it doesn't necessarily mean a new appraisal. It means to have a final inspection done, or to have a reinspection so the appraiser comes back out to confirm that some sort of work that's been needed on the property has been completed, or that something that's been identified as being deficient in the original appraisal report has been corrected. So what are the common reasons on those?
So Jason, let me ask you this. All right, you've been a branch manager for quite some time. You've got a great reputation. You've You've done a lot in this industry, and what goes through your mind, okay, when you need a reinspection, a final, you get the appraisal in, and you're finally, you're thinking touchdown, right? Like you're thinking, all right, and then you think, oh man, there's something else that needs to be done, right? Because a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times, you get the loan application, the borrower is ready to go, they get the house ready to buy, or they're ready to refinance. You're looking at, okay, value, condition, is it as is or subject to, what needs to be repaired, what the value come in at, so do you need to renegotiate the contract, and, as a branch manager speaking, what goes through your head when you have a situation that comes up like that?
I would say the first thing that goes through my head is, why didn't first thing is that I'm going to have to cover this $150 reinspection fee because I didn't disclose it to the borrower, so now I'm stuck with a $150 fee. And the second thing that goes through my mind is, why didn't someone tell me that there was these issues that may cause the appraisal to need a reinspection, possibly miss our closing, and cost someone unexpected money that they weren't planning on paying, especially on a tight deal where every penny matters to the client and to me to get the deal done. Why didn't someone tell me that there wasn't a board across the back door that led out to a 10-foot drop? Why wasn't there that safety board on there? That could have been addressed beforehand. So that's one of the first two things that really go through my mind.
So you think to yourself, man, because you want to be proactive, right? Like your whole game is, how do I get ahead of the issue, right?
And that's why we're having the discussion now. So to kind of bring it back into the question of what are the common reasons an appraisal needs an inspection. So that's a great question to ask, because obviously the part that's frustrating for Jason and for any originator, probably for any homeowner, is that they may not be aware that that's something that would require a reinspection. Okay,
correct.
If they knew that up front, they would address it so it didn't become an issue later on. And I think that's the reason we have this question. And I will say this. Now, the first thing is, it depends on your loan program type, obviously, because if you're looking at if it's an FHA program, it's going to be much more restrictive, obviously, than on a conventional. Conventional, they'll let go almost anything, not everything, but almost anything. But on FHA, it's going to be a lot more tight. Now, on FHA, primarily, something with that property causes it to fail to meet the 4000.1 standard. That's the main thing that you're going to see, right? So that, and then anything else that's a health and safety issue. And health and safety is going to apply for either or. It's going to apply for conventional or FHA. So to your point, Jason, if you have, okay, let's say you have a deck in the backyard, it's higher than 18 inches and there's no rail on it, it's going to require repair and then a reinspect. Okay, if you've got some sort of reverse grading, or it looks like you may have water intrusion or water damage to the foundation or to the property itself, that's going to require a reinspection. Anything that's going to require remediation will then require a reinspection because they have to confirm that it's been completed. Now, the most common ones, okay, and this is something that should always be discussed, particularly on a purchase file. This has to be discussed with the realtor. You got to make sure the water's on. You got to make sure the utilities are working. Make sure that the appliances, if they're conveyed, that those are all functioning as well, right? Check to make sure all the switch covers are in place, light switch covers. Okay, that's a small one, but they're going to hit you for it unless, okay, and because it's very relevant for where we are, the state of Maryland, you've got to be very cognizant of the new smoke detector law. Because, if that's going to be the one that's going to trip up the most folks, at least in Maryland for now, until we all kind of get used to that, because the way the law is written, the requirements depend on when the property was constructed. And the most restrictive requirements are for new construction properties, and what you don't want to do is have a situation where you've got a previously constructed property and the appraiser is trying to apply a new construction standard to it, because it's too high of a restriction and it's not accurate. So those are some of the real common ones that we see, but the most common ones that will drive you the most insane, because they're the easiest ones to avoid. If you've got chipping paint or peeling paint or a hole in the floor or something, you kind of can't get around that. That's going to require a repair. But you can make sure the utilities are on. You can make sure that, the water's on, all that stuff. Because, again, if it's not on at the time of the original inspection, the appraiser has to go back out to confirm it. It's not their job to ask ahead of time.
Yeah. Now,
right?
So Jason,
so that would be the first. That's the primary one.
To Fritz's point, right? So I'm an appraiser by trade, right? So welcome, right? As an appraiser by trade, so you go out to a property, right? And so this is where it kind of becomes a little difficult, right? Because some guys, so some people have this sort of like, you go out there and you really don't know what you're getting into 100%. Meaning you talk to the bar a little bit about, obviously, the condition of the property. You do a little online research. But to anyone, no baby's ugly. So they're going to...
It's not true. There's some real ugly babies.
I know. Well, there you go. No baby's ugly, so no one's going to ever say anything negative.
Sorry.
And
you got an ugly baby. You know it. I can't help you there, man.
Kind and you don't necessarily 100% know. And so you run into a situation where, you're kind of walking in blind at some level, and you're just reporting, you're almost reporting the news, right? Like, oh, there's vinyl siding, concrete driveway, is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath with a finished basement and a big hole in the wall and lead-based paint, chips, right? And so, a lot of times, we're just as surprised as the
delicious lead chips.
The mortgage company or the realtor, and then things like with FHA inspections and stuff like that. I mean, it becomes more difficult. So as a lender, do you do anything, or and I'm sure you do, but I mean, do you do anything to try to get intel from the borrower beforehand?
I mean, especially on a refinance. I mean, I'm asking them a ton of questions about the property and the shape of it, and if there's holes in it, and have they started any projects and left the ladder out in the backyard. That's your favorite one, where you got a bunch of construction tools in the backyard, and you guys take a picture of it and want to know an explanation of it. So yeah, I mean, we're prepping them, but it seems, a lot of times they're saying everything's good before they listen. They kind of exclude that. But we're definitely prepping them to make it. I mean, being proactive is the #1 thing to help out with an appraisal. And we don't have that many issues that pop up just because we prepare beforehand. But yeah, I think the peeling paint is a big one. Maybe they don't even know that it's peeling, because it's not very often you just walk around your house, you know. So I think the peeling paint's huge.
Yeah, and a lot of times, so FHA has a safety, soundness, security type philosophy where they make sure things are safe, secure, and sound. And I always used to tell people common sense method approach. If you had 15 5-year-olds at a birthday party, what would you lock up and fix before they got there, right? You know what I mean? 15 5-year-old boys at a birthday party. What doors would you close? What broken window panes would you fix? What chipping paint would you repair? You need to have everything in working functional order. I would call Chuck E. Cheese personally. You would call Chuck E. Cheese. There you go.
That would be that. But no, but I get what you're saying, and it's a good way to make the point. And I think I just want to thank Jason. Actually, I know this may sound a little odd, but it really actually is very helpful to the appraiser and to the AMC when you're taking a proactive approach like that to have that conversation, because the reality is, and we all know this, is that people are in love with their own home. It's always going to be perfect to them.
Correct.
Okay, even though out in the open, we're not looking at this house in that way. So when you're having an appraisal done, it's a collateral evaluation, and it's a very unemotional process about something that people are very emotional about.
Correct.
And so anytime you can prep them in advance, because it's one thing if you don't have the conversation and then the borrower is upset that, hey, why do I have to pay another $150 to have this guy come back out just because I have a giant hole in my roof, right?
Correct.
Okay. It's a whole different conversation when originator can say, well, I specifically asked you if you had any literal holes in the house that we had to be aware of prior to. So if you don't give me the information, you're not putting me in a good position to help you.
Now, Jason, I'm sure you coach. I'm sure you coach your LOs, right, to do that. But I mean, that's still difficult because even as the appraiser, there's sometimes where you don't even people just don't know what's wrong. Like people don't know what's wrong with their house, and or don't always know what somebody's looking for, right? Because they live there, right?
Right, but you have to ask the question, right? You have to ask the question. Now, if you don't get the sufficient answer, that's a different. That's a whole different ball of wax, right?
Yeah. So let's go into the next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's go into.
I was gonna say it's a purchase market now, so you got a lot of times you got to ask the listing agent because they've been to the property. The buyer may have only been there once, and they were so excited about the big kitchen.
That's right.
They didn't see the peeling paint on the back of the house. So I mean, you got to really talk to the listing agent and find out some information. So you got to build that that rapport with them to make sure everything goes smooth.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and a great couple of points actually, because for one thing, certainly it's a purchase market. That's absolutely true, and also too, especially in that case, because when you're talking about a refi, you're talking to the homeowner. The homeowner is not an expert on is not an expert, right? The realtor should be, right? The listing agent should be an expert. They're a professional. They should be an expert. They should be able to tell you and know, hey, here are the condition concerns for this property, because that should also affect the offer.
Correct. So getting into our next question, right? So why do appraisals take so long? So maybe, Jason, you can map out the process for us and for our listeners and for the whole mortgage industry to a certain extent, because this is covered by a lot of the appraisal industry, of how the loan process and just, the timeline. You get a new purchase, there's a contract, there's title that needs to be done. Just, walk through that process, and I will walk through why appraisals take time as an appraiser, so we can explain the whole thing and then how important it is to get the appraisal in on time. So describe to all of our listeners what you're dealing with as a branch manager.
Sure. We meet with a client. We review all the documents. They sign all the documents, and then we can order the appraisal. You can order the appraisal without them signing stuff, but you can't ask them to pay for it. So if you want your client to pay for their appraisal up front, which 99% of people are doing, then you got to have your signed loan estimate. You got to have your signed documents in the file. Then you can order your appraisal. Then they send the invoice to the borrower pays it online, then it's assigned to an appraiser, and then the appraiser calls and makes the appointment to get out there. All of those things take a few days, so you're already 3 or 4 days into it before the appraiser even gets the file or the order.
Yeah. Now, what kind of timeline are you dealing with? So you're doing 30 days, 60-day lock. I mean, you're up against it.
Well, let's say we do a 30-day close. You do a 30-day lock, and most of the time people want to close 30 days or sooner, and you're 7 to 10 days on an appraisal, and then you got to send the file into underwriting or whatever that your process is. My process is a little different, but you got a good 7 or 10 days from the time you order it until the time it comes in. On a 30-day process, that's 2 weeks. That's 10 business days worth of work.
Yeah. So you get a borrower, right? So so you get a borrower. You fill out the application. You send the disclosures, right? So let's say that takes 3 days, right?
Yeah.
3 to 5 days for disclosures, right? And then then there's a grace period, right? You have to wait a little bit. How long do you have to wait? And then you got to order the appraisal. Get the appraisal in, review the appraisal, order title, closing, all that stuff, all up against a 30-day window, right, at most, plus competition in the market, plus underwriting, plus all those things. It definitely...
Holidays, everything.
And if there's a final inspection needed, by the way, which is, again, comes back to that earlier discussion, because
Yeah.
again, if there's a final, that's going to cause additional delays.
Oh, yeah.
You have to wait for the work to be completed, okay, at a minimum, and then you have to have another reinspection done. So
Yeah, and to that point, right? So you're working up against a rate lock. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You're working up against a rate lock. You're working against a contract, right? And there's a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
So describe to everybody what happens when the appraisal, because usually, I mean, most of the time you're waiting on appraisals. I don't know how much, you know, a lot of the guys that I know that run shops, they will not have an issue with underwriting to delay a file. Meaning if they will push files to make sure they meet the purchase date. But on the appraisal side, if there's a delay, you know, the inspection, the appraiser is going to take 6 weeks. It's in Colorado, and it's going to take 6 weeks. I mean, they're going to have to push the. So describe to everybody what has to happen when the appraisal delays, or, you know, not necessarily the appraisal, but there's a delay in the loan process that we got to push the date back.
Yeah, let's just think about it. Let's. I mean, today's February 2nd. Let's think about it. You're closing. Let's say you're closing a loan on the 26th, 27th, 28th. So let's say you're closing the end of the month. You got, from today, you have 18 business days to close a loan from today. So if you started today, we order the loan documents that are sent out tonight. Hopefully they get out tonight, maybe Monday, but let's say they get out tonight. You review them all weekend. You sign them, get them back to us on Monday. We order the appraisal on Monday. You don't pay for it until Tuesday. The appraiser calls but can't get in touch with the listing agent for 2 or 3 days. That puts us to Friday. Now we're at 11 business days to close a loan. So we've already underwrote the file. We've already ordered title. We've ordered insurance, but we can't get the insurance because we don't have the appraisal yet. A lot of insurance companies want that appraisal.
yeah.
And then the appraiser gets out to the house. They appraise the house, and it takes a few days for them to write the appraisal. Then it goes back. Then it goes through review. And then if there's any changes the appraiser needs to make, it goes back to the appraiser. Then the appraiser gets it back to us. And then it goes to underwriting. And then you got 2 or 3 days in underwriting to get it out. So, I mean, you can see how starting a loan today, if we're not proactive and everybody's not on the same page, if there's a reinspection that needs to be done, there's a good chance you're going to miss closing on the 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then what world has to be moved around? Because I know it's not minimal. What has to be moved around for you to move that closing date? I mean, it's not just, hey, we moved the date. Because sometimes there's rate lock extensions. You got to buy the rate. You got to redisclose.
Yep.
I mean, there's a whole host of. So describe to everybody
may have to
what has to happen.
You might even have to update income docs and all that too. I mean.
Oh, well, you guys are missing the big part. We're only thinking about one person right now, the buyer we have. We got to think about the seller, the seller's agent, the people that are buying their house. Typically, when you sell a house, you buy another one. So if our customer is buying a house settling on the 28th, there's a good chance that the person that they're selling or buying the house from is closing on the 28th in the evening. They now have to push their closing. The moving trucks were scheduled. They got to redo that. The moving companies might not reschedule moving for 2 weeks because they're already booked up as well. You had your internet set up. You had your electric. You had the cable guy was coming out there. Mom and dad were taking off work to watch the kids, or mom and dad were going to watch the kids so you can take off work and move. So you've already requested days off. You got to extend the lock. And this is just our party. You also got the seller. Then they're buying a house. Then the other person's buying a house. They've already set up moving. They might be moving out of state. They might be leaving the country. They might be going on vacation. I mean, the list is enormous of problems. Not to mention that everybody involved has 2 or 3 different reasons why they chose that day for closing, and they plan their lives around that. And it's a very upsetting time if you have to move closing. Even moving closing up is stressful on everybody. You know, as good as that sounds, it's really stressful on everybody still.
Well, yeah, and to that point, right, and I think a lot of times that element, the nuances and stuff, right, you know what I mean, Fritz, you deal, I mean, Fritz deals with this stuff all day. All day, right? The nuances, the stuff sometimes get missed where people don't realize there's somebody who's moving out on this date, and everyone coordinated, hey, today, 26th, 27th, we're out. You know, we're going to have a hotel. We got the movers coming on the 28th. You know, we got, you know, all these things happening. And we've had situations, I mean, this has happened, where, like, the person has to go get a hotel. or all of a sudden they got to move their stuff into storage for some revision or some small little thing. I mean, and at that point, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and the thing that drives you insane is that it could have been avoided, and then the borrower says, "Why didn't you know about this before?" And it's because we started the loan on the 2nd. I didn't get my first copy of the appraisal until the 10th or the 11th because there's weekends, there's all the people we talked about earlier. So I didn't get it till the 11th or 12th, and I'm already telling you on the 12th that we're going to miss closing, and you say, "Why didn't you tell me this on the 2nd?" And it's because we didn't know.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah,
we don't see that. We never see the house. The first time I see the house is if I look it up on one of the websites or when I get the appraisal.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm gonna jump into two more of these because I think these are great. So I'm gonna do these in reverse, right? Because the first question is, so who can call the appraiser directly? All right, and then we're gonna jump into what happens about value. So because the two of these are really tied in. So who can call the appraiser directly? The AMC. That's the acceptable answer. Now, yes, a DE underwriter can call an appraiser directly if they have questions about the appraiser's report. That can happen. They're allowed to do that. They're a direct endorsement underwriter. They can call the appraiser directly. That's fine. However, it's really not going to help expedite anything because if the appraiser is going to want whatever is needed to be corrected, if it's a correction, whatever reason that underwriter is calling the appraiser. Now, if the underwriter is just calling the appraiser to get a verbal answer about something, by all means, have fun. Call, get that, do that. That's the quickest way. Although, in my experience, underwriters don't behave that way. They want it in writing because they have to back it up and verify it. Okay, and they have to have something there that they can produce if they're asked, because they will be asked, particularly if you're a DE underwriter. You're not going to risk your endorsement, okay, by not putting something in writing. So who can call the appraiser directly? DE underwriter can call the appraiser directly, or the AMC. In reality, you're better off to have the AMC call that appraiser directly for a number of reasons. One, they have the relationship already with the appraiser. Two, they're financially in control of the appraiser's compensation for the report, so the appraiser is more likely to be responsive to them. It's a bit cynical to say that, but that's the truth, okay? And the other really important reason, and this ties into the earlier question, or the other question of if the value doesn't come in where it's believed it should, what are the next steps to be taken? And we'll discuss our process for that in a second, but here's the other reason why you want to make sure you contact the AMC. Because, and I've seen this happen many times, an appraiser who's contacted directly by someone he shouldn't be contacted on a file. So, for example, an originator, a processor, a loan assistant, okay, calls the appraiser directly. Per USPAP, the appraiser can now say, hey, that's an attempt to influence me. I recuse myself from any further work on the report.
Yeah, and appraisers, and I'm not speaking for the whole appraiser community, but what's interesting is, you know, if we got super technical, right, like super legalese, there's technically nothing wrong with anybody calling the appraiser at all.
There's a lot wrong with it.
But at the same time, I think appraisers, and some are better than others on this, get a little, I would say, feisty about anybody calling them to question them at all. And Jason, I mean, has that been your experience, or I mean, is it hit or miss? Because it's kind of hit or miss a little bit too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't called an appraiser in a while, but I know that anytime you have an issue with an appraisal, you got to remember that it's an opinion of value, right, and that person has done thousands of appraisals. They know what they're doing. So a lot of times you want to call and say, hey, Mr. Appraiser, you messed up. You're basically saying they don't know how to do their job, mm-hmm, and you're better at their job than they are. So they're automatically going to have a little bit of grudge against you. And then you're right. I mean, if you say, hey, why didn't you use this value, you're automatically influencing them, because you're saying it. So I think, calling an appraiser, a lot of times realtors will want to call an appraiser if a value comes in low, because of the same thing for them. They're a professional, and when they listed the property, they said it was going to sell for 400. You appraised it at 385, and their pride is hurt too, because they're thinking, I did my job, and they should have sold it for, should have appraised at 400. So now they have to go back to their sellers and say, I messed up. It's easier to say somebody else messed up than it is for you. So it's always, that's the fine line of who actually did drop the ball. Sometimes, sometimes the value was 400 in June, but it's not in August, because of the comps.
And and let me just, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. I got to give Jason credit, man. That is, look, that is such a perfect statement. And I really, on this, I mean, really, you nailed it. I mean, nailed it right on the head. You hammer right.
Virtually hug me if you want.
Oh man, no, well, listen, again, I have to make the point, again, the issue is the appraiser can claim undue influence and then recuse themselves. Where that becomes an issue, particularly if there's a question on the report, because remember, you're not going to necessarily want to contact an appraiser just because there's a value concern. You may be calling because you're questioning any number of other things that they included in the report. Okay, the condition. Okay, the quality, of the property, whichever. Okay, but again, once you contact them directly, you give them the opportunity. You hand them a parachute to jump right out of the plane, and you give them the out. You hand it to them. You give them the out.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if you call the AMC and you raise the issue with the AMC, which, by the way, it's the AMC's job. It's our job to assist you with resolution on these things. So please call us and let us do our job for you. We work for you. We want to help you. We want to help you get a solution. So give us an opportunity to do it. Now, the appraiser can't claim undue influence when I'm the AMC calling him saying, I need you to explain this, because I clearly have no interest in the value. And if the appraiser is going to make the claim
that's very true. It's softer. It's
right.
Definitely a softer.
Well, if the appraiser is going to make a claim that the appraisal management company is trying to influence their value, that one I can dismiss immediately. I mean, that I can argue against that and win that one every single time, because we literally have no stake in it. It has literally nothing to do with us. What we are absolutely concerned with is the quality and accuracy of the report for our client. That is why we're contacting the appraiser, because just like Jason said, this is an opinion of value. And what I try to explain to appraisers is, you've got to understand, from your perspective as the appraiser, your opinion makes perfect sense to you, because it's your opinion. You hold it, you carry it around. So when you write that on paper, you put that on paper about that property, to you, it is crystal clear. Now, unfortunately, that's not always the case for other folks. And that doesn't mean that the underwriter doesn't know what they're doing, or that something's wrong with the appraisal, or that anyone did anything bad. It's just, we need to have a little bit more communication. We need to have a little bit of clarification so we can understand the opinion that the appraiser is providing. And as an appraiser, if you can't back up the opinion that you've given, then that's a concern. And that's a question of, then you have a question of accuracy and competency. Okay?
Yeah,
if you can tell me why you did it, okay, good. If you can't give me an explanation as to why you did something, that's a bigger problem. And I think that's a lot of the concern from Jason's side. They need an explanation. And so...
Yeah, and Jason, and when it comes to that, you need an explanation. So as a loan originator, what do you really need? You know what I mean? So like when it comes to, what do you really need as far as, if you're having a dispute with the appraiser, right? Because there's a part, and I talk about this all the time, right? In our office here. Half of it is some of it is they just want to find out if there's anything that could be changed, even though they necessarily don't want it to be changed. Meaning the purchase comes in, the appraisal comes in below the purchase price. They're questioning it because obviously everybody's concerned, and then they may or may not even particularly care if the value gets changed, because some of it, and this is just between you and I, it's just a little bit of PR for the seller or the buyer, right? You're just trying to make it look like you're putting up a dispute, because there's really nothing you can do. I mean, you're just trying to get an answer, right? Like as to why. It's a service issue as opposed to sometimes a legitimate concern. But describe to everybody, what you would really want, or what you're really, when you're coming back on an appraisal, what you're really looking for.
So, first we want to make it, obviously, you want the value to support the purchase price, and when it doesn't, you need that solid answer, because everyone's emotionally involved and financially involved, and if we use the number of 400,000 and then it appraises for 385, the sellers have already spent that 15,000 to something.
That's right.
Because they are assuming that they're making it, so they're planning, they're buying furniture for the new house. Little Johnny's getting a swing set. So there's all these emotions that go into it. So it's not like, hey, it didn't appraise, just take it, sorry. Because we call the listing agent, say, hey, it didn't appraise, it came in 15,000 short. They freak out, oh my God, they did their research, so they're going to say, I need to call the appraiser. They're going to provide reasons why they think their house is good. So what we're looking for is, if the question I always ask to a listing agent is, why did you think when you listed it at 400 it was going to appraise for 400? I say, give me the 3 comps or the 4 comps that you are using to support the value that are sold, not the ones that are listed down the street, because we know you can't count those. Give me the sold comps that are similar, and they'll send them to me, and they will send them to you guys, and you guys have always entertained that idea, and that's why I love working with you, is that you're open to suggestions, or maybe somebody did make a mistake. But what we need back is that solid answer. On comp 1, the reason I didn't use it is because of this. The reason I did use this and adjusted it was because of that. And I make adjustments per this guideline that says I have to make this adjustment. The reason I said your house was average condition is because your kitchen is 30 years old, or whatever the number is. But just a real detailed explanation, because they have to feel good about why they didn't get that $15,000, and why the realtor thinks they still did a great job, but for whatever reason the appraisal came back. Because the whole time, as lenders, we've been talking to the listing agent, trying to prove ourselves so that we can work together with them, and they don't want to seem like, hey, we accepted this contract with Jason's pre-approval and his appraisers suck. That's always going to come back. Their appraisers suck. And this other guy, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and dealing in that perception, right? Because a lot of it is just perception, right? Like, again, I'm an appraiser, right? So you go out and do the appraisal, and I've done this 1,000 times. You go out and you list, and the guy's like, well, this house should sell for $400,000, and you look in your comps, and there's not one comp ever in that subdivision that sold for $400,000, right? And you look at all the comparables that they send you, and the comparables you can't, that they send you first, for let's say getting the value changed, are in a different state or a different county. Like, it's not even close. And so you're sort of dealing with this thing where, and that's not always the case, right? Because sometimes you do have legitimate things that you've missed, right? And I always tell people, to our previous conversation, you lived in your house for 10 years. As an appraiser, I'm there for an hour, maybe 2 hours at most. It's impossible for me to, I can't tell you swapped out the electrical system, right? Because I can't see through the walls. The plumbing system's been changed and all these additional features. Sometimes that always communicated, right? In the most transparent.
Can I cut you off real quick?
Yeah.
Can I cut you off real quick? Would it help if the buyer were to make a list of what they have done and just hand it to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're talking, oh, we did this and we did that and we did this. Well, the average person remembers 60% of what's told to them, with any given time. So if you know, in 3 minutes they're driving down the street to get a phone call. They've already forgot half the things they said. So if they write it down, that could really help support whether the house is in average or above average condition, right?
Yeah.
Actually, Jason, if you go to our website, www.CoesterVMS.com, and click borrowers on the main thing, there's actually a little step-by-step process that goes into exactly that. If you'll fulfill to make a list of any home improvements and upgrades you've done in the last 5 years, you may offer this information to the appraiser.
Is there a PDF in there?
There's a infograph, but it's on there. But yeah, just check it out.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool because to your point, as an appraiser, what I used to do is, so you come in, I come out and appraise your house, right? So there's no way I'm going to know everything. So if you gave me a list of like a nice pre-printed list of I did the following renovations in the last 5 years, I scan that into the appraisal, right?
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, the borrower's done this, and it also gives me a reference point. You just feel more comfortable, honestly, because it's like you give me, okay, I renovated the kitchen, I've replaced the plumbing, I've done the electrical work, I've had the house re-landscaped, and I put in a new patio and replaced the siding. Let's say in the last 5 years.
So here's where this is I'm going to jump in on this because
Yeah.
we've only got a couple minutes left, and I want to wrap this one up. But I want to say, so here's where this is a great thing to do. It's very important. It's a very good idea to do this. Okay, to provide that information to the appraiser for a number of reasons. The primary reason is because that way you've now got the borrower involved, and they're actually they want to be involved in the process. Okay, and a lot of times if a property doesn't appraise for a value that they expect, you'll hear the complaint there will be that they feel like they weren't as involved in the process as they should have been, and if they were more involved, then things may have gone differently. Okay, and in some cases that's a very valid concern for them to raise, particularly if you've had a lot of this type of work done on your home and so on. Now, that being said, you also have to set the right expectation and let them know they're not getting one-to-one. Okay, so as an example, property in South Florida, guy closes on the place, and it's a standard PUD in a standard neighborhood, and then he spends 40 grand to build himself a custom patio in the backyard.
Yeah.
And can't understand why his house isn't worth $40,000 more than the next one. Well, no, you're not going to get a one-to-one, right?
Oh, it's not a one-to-one. So what's interesting is,
but again, you want them involved, and the feeling that they're involved is important. The other thing is, the appraiser can address those concerns up front so that you're not coming back and having to have a revision done to explain why this didn't come in, or why this wasn't here, why this wasn't there. So you tend to get a more accurate report up front. Okay, you're able to address the borrower's concerns proactively, as we've been talking about. Okay, and again, you keep them involved in the process, which is vitally important.
Yeah, no, to that point, right? So a lot of times there's a lot of confusion, and this is worth the whole whole thing. So, sorry, 1 second. So again, a lot of times there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion around what is worth something when you renovate it, right? And what happens are how much. And I put $50,000 into my house renovating, therefore my house goes from $400 to $450. And no, not the case. So what it is, and this is just
unless you put $50,000 of solid gold bricks in your fireplace surround.
There you go. The appraiser can account for personal property.
Well, if you build it in, then it's not personal property, and so the value of the material itself would.
So you go into a neighborhood, right? So you go to the contract's $400,000. So there's comparables. Let's say on the low end of the house in that neighborhood, in that market, at let's say $350, and those are the houses that have not been renovated, that have been just poorly maintained, or don't have all the upgrades. They got, let's say carpet instead of hardwood. They have standard kitchen appliances instead of the upgraded.
So they're in Sterling Park.
They're exactly right. They're in Sterling. And so those are the lower end. And then you have, let's say, the highest end. These guys, it's owned by a guy who bought the model, and he has all the upgrades, and you're at let's say the 410 range, right? You don't want to and because you're not going to get anything more than what those are. And the basic reason is this, is that, let's say I own a $400,000 house, and let's say I had some extra money, and I wanted to put in a pool, a patio, and all this other things, and just make it the biggest, baddest thing in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's still a $400,000 neighborhood, mm-hmm. and the homeowners next to you and everyone next to you is the schools, everything that's included, the lot size, the convenience, and all those things are included. So if you were going to put more in, I would just go buy a better house in a bigger neighborhood or a better neighborhood. Well, so you end up capping yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that.
Here's where I'm going to summarize it.
Build a $500,000 house in a $400,000 neighborhood.
Correct.
Right, we have an old saying in the underwriting, in underwriting circles, we would have a saying. It's very simple. It's, you've got a castle in a swamp.
Correct.
Don't own a castle in a swamp.
Now, Jason, do you run across a lot of buyers or sellers or people who have, maybe more particularly homeowners, not necessarily buyers or sellers, right? They're on the refi side, mm-hmm. who are in a mild, let's say, there's a disconnect in expectations when they renovated their house. Does that happen a lot?
I don't know what a refi is anymore.
There you go.
That's the right answer.
Years ago.
There you go.
But speaking on the purchase side, we have a lot of good agents here in Frederick, Maryland, and they've been really good about educating their buyers, in the last few years, and I think that's really helped. So they're not going in with these crazy expectations. But you're right with the refinancing. I was going to mention is, I asked you if we could do a list and provide it to the appraiser. The biggest thing that's going to come back is I told, the buyer's going to say, I told the appraiser I had new faucets, and they didn't notate it in the appraisal.
Yep.
And so that's where I was thinking, when we did do a lot of refis, that's kind of what happened, I told, I did the appraisal, and, I feel like it should have appraised for more. Zillow said it should have appraised for more. So
the good old Zillow, right? That's funny. Good old Zillow. That's one of those things where that has caused. So my opinion is Zillow, right? It's so accurate. It's accurate enough to just kill yourself. I mean, to be dangerous, because you deal with a situation to where
killing yourself is dangerous.
I'm just saying it's a very dangerous thing, because it's like you use it and you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, the contract price is $400. It says $397 or $402. Like, must be accurate. And then next one is, contract price is $400. It says it's worth $220. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's just completely off. And that has been, it's a free tool, right? So you can't complain. But that has been sort of and again, generally it's good, but that has been kind of so I always tell people, you got to look at the listings, right? You got to filter it and just look at the listings and say, okay, what are listings for in this market? And if the listings are close, and you can find comparables that are similarly looking to the subject, just go off the list price, right? Because you got a townhouse.
I got a question. Since you touched on that, I got a question on the contract. I put you can't do an appraisal without a contract, and the contract has the sale price on it. Yep. Why do you need that? Why is that so important? Aren't you supposed to be appraising? And this is kind of a personal question, because I wanted to ask you guys. Aren't you supposed to appraise it for what it's worth? I always have people ask me that. So
what
does it matter what the sale price is? You tell me what it's worth. Don't matter about the sale price.
So at its simplest way, right? The contract is a comparable, and actually you're technically allowed to use the contract as a additional value comparable in a increasing and or decreasing market to kind of staple it. So if somebody says, okay, what is more relevant than the market in action, right? So you got somebody who's willing to put $400,000 down on this property, write the check right there today. So to an appraiser, that is the most relevant form of current market data. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the house is worth, or that doesn't necessarily mean what the house is appraised for. That's just a very good indication of, if you had all the contracts that were currently under contract that haven't closed, and you found out that all the contracts were worth 380 and 370, and you got a house here under contract for 400, that's going to influence a little bit of the comparables you're looking at, especially if you can go back and say, well, hey, I had ones that sold in October for 420 and December for 410, and this one's 400, and I got other contracts at 380. Ooh, we got a decreasing market. Or reverse of that, if you have previous sales at 380 and you've got one contract at 400 for the subject, and you see all the listings are at 410 and 420, you're going to think to yourself, well, I got a little bit of data here now that says there may be an increasing market, right? And so that's why it's relevant. Now, sometimes it's not, but it's a great way of kind of benchmarking what's going on in that current market, and it's the most relevant form of a comparable for the subject.
So if I'm buying a house, if I have a contract at $400,000 and the appraiser's doing his job, the contract's at $400, but the value is really $415, are they going to appraise it at $400, or are you going to give me the $415?
No, they'll do 415 if that's what the comparables in the data indicates.
So they'll do 415. Yeah, they'll do 415. But it's relevant. That 400 is relevant, and that 400 is relevant because you really have the market in action. I mean, that's your closest representation to the market in action and the worth of that market.
Yeah. I would say this.
Refi, you like on a refinance. Do you guys want to know what the client thinks the estimate is, or what we need to know for the loan? Does that play any impact on what the appraisal is going to come in at?
So personally, just
no, it shouldn't.
No, it does not at all. So they're actually outlawed.
The borrower's always like, I think it should appraise for 380. Here's all my research, and then when we order the appraisal, it says estimated value. Why is that important? Why should I put estimated value on there if that doesn't affect it? And I kind of know the answer to this, but there's probably a lot of people that don't. So
yeah, so it's a good question.
It's a good question.
So number one, it's illegal to send that to the appraiser on a refi.
Yep.
So just so everyone knows that, that's actually like a law. We ask for it because we want to know, just for our QC purposes. Like, from my perspective, if we think, or if the borrower thinks their house is worth $400,000, and the appraisal comes in at $600,000 or $300,000, or it's way off, well, to me, there's a little bit of I want to kind of know why. I'll sit there and ask kind of that question to myself and an appraiser. Personally, I actually liked it when the estimation of value was included, because it gave you an idea of where to start, right? And not that you're going to start with a particular value and kind of, but it gives you a place at least to where it's another person's local educated opinion, right? Like in your house, in your neighborhood, you lived there for the last 10 years or whatever, and you know what homes sold, you know what your neighbor's home, you may have even went to a couple open houses.
Yep.
In your market. Like I know for instance in my neighborhood, if there's an open house, I'll probably go check it out, maybe just to kind of see, and ask how much.
Open out and see if there's going to be like a yard sale.
There you go. Exactly right. And it gives you an idea of the estimate. It gives you an idea of the value, right? And so I kind of didn't influence my decision as far as the value, but it gave me a little bit of shading. As far as where's a good place to start, because you got to start somewhere.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I think the thing that we missed is that on that value, we were talking about value. I know you want to wrap up here. We were talking about that the value comes in low. We never gave what's the best way to.
Okay.
I know what I like to do, but what do you guys want us to do as far as the community? The appraisal came in low. Everyone's upset. What's the best steps to get that resolved or get that answer? What do we do?
Okay. So the first thing is you want to contact your AMC, okay, because every AMC has a bit of a different process as far as how they handle these things. Now, for us, we try to make this as easy as we possibly can. You contact your relationship manager, you fill out a form, you send some data in, and you're good to go. We submit the reconsideration to the appraiser. So there's a few things that are very important to keep in mind. The first is make sure that whatever you're submitting for reconsideration, okay, if you're providing additional comparables, if you're disputing material data in the report itself, GLA or room count, okay, you want to come with whatever evidence you have up front to make the best case you can, because you've got to remember, you're only going to get one reconsideration. You're only going to get one shot at this to get this thing right, okay? And what you don't want to do is come in unprepared and miss your opportunity, because you can't come back a second time. So you want to make sure you're looking at those things. So for example, if you're getting additional comparables, make sure they're more recent or as recent as the comparables in the report. Make sure the GLA is close, okay? Make sure the neighborhood is correct. Make sure you're not crossing a major barrier, highway, or street to get a new comp, because that's going to fundamentally change neighborhood characteristics. So you've really got to look at the accuracy of the information that you're submitting and make sure that you're taking your best shot up front to get the reconsideration. That's my advice. Now, you know, the other side of that is you've got to realize, and you know, more often than not, the appraiser will have very good reasons for not including a certain comp, okay, or for not including or giving value to a certain feature, or for making an adjustment a certain way, or what have you. So there's two ways to look at a reconsideration, and the issue here is in a lot of cases, folks only look at one side of it, which is I want to dispute the value and try to get the appraisal, you know, get the value higher. That's generally the main way that folks look at this, but you got to look at it from two perspectives. That's a potential outcome, but if you look at it from the perspective of, I want to get my questions answered to make sure I've got the best quality report.
That's a good
I have the best comps, I have the best data, I have the best information. Because if the report is, you've got to make sure, we've got to make sure the report is the most accurate that it can be, then the value is right, or the value will be right. Okay? If you've got an inaccurate report, or you've got bad comparables in a file, you're going to have an issue with the value. The value won't be supported, or it won't be high enough, or what have you. So just the same way that we're calling into question, did the appraiser use the best available data, you've got to really ask yourself that question up front. Am I giving the best available data to dispute what's in this report? And that's really the key. So again, we've got to approach it as, don't approach it as you're trying to change the value on the report, because that rarely happens, right, to be fair, okay? But if you approach, and also too, approaching it that way with an appraiser immediately puts the appraiser on the defensive, Jason. As you've mentioned, you know, you've made great points on this earlier about, you know, look, realtors are pros too. They don't want to have to admit that they're wrong. Appraisers are pros. They don't want to admit that they're wrong, right? So in this case, it's not an issue of anyone saying, hey, someone's wrong, someone's not. It's, or we need to change this, or we need to change that. It's kind of back to what we were talking about earlier. We need clarification, okay? We need clarification, and we need to understand this report the way that the appraiser understands the report. It's got to make the same kind of sense to us as it does to them, because if we approach it from a service issue standpoint of, let's get you an answer. Let's get you an answer, because here's what I can tell you. If you submit a value reconsideration to me, I can't guarantee you anything about what may or may not change in the report.
But you can guarantee an answer.
But I can, right, exactly. But I can guarantee you'll get a response, because that I can make the appraiser do. I can't make the appraiser change anything in the report. I can't influence them in that way, and I don't want to. But I can darn sure make them answer the questions that are being asked, because, you know, about the file. And if the appraiser pushes back on that, the response is simple. The borrower needs an answer on this. At the end of the day, this isn't about the AMC, and about the loan officer, and about the appraiser. No. The borrower wants an answer. The borrower needs an answer on this. We are all, the one person involved in this transaction who is not a professional in the mortgage industry, who doesn't deal with this every day, and who doesn't have any idea of what's going on, is the borrower. So it's on us as the AMC, as the appraiser, to give them the best possible answer, to give them the answer and to try to educate them as to how we got there. And that I can make the appraiser do if there's a reconsideration request. I can't make them change the value, but I can make them provide an answer. And that's really the way that I would recommend to clients that they look at the reconsiderations, is that we really need the answer. We want the answer. We want the data. Why?
Yeah, and from an appraiser's perspective, so again, to my previous comment, so you've lived there for 10 years, right? I'm there for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. It's impossible for me to know everything about this property, right? It's just, I mean, it's just you're going to miss something, right? You're going to miss, and sometimes for the better or for the worse, right? Like, you know, you miss something and you know, but what I would be kind of is assume that they don't know everything, okay? Mm-hmm. And that if there's something missing, it was definitely on accident, mm-hmm. right? And you want to just provide that information. And to your point, give them the corrective data, because what you're dealing with on an appraiser side is, okay, Jason, I give you this address, 112 Johnson Street. It's in Hagerstown, right? And it's 2 acres, and it's a ranch, and the guys modified the house, and I got to go find other comparable sales that are similar to that property. And a lot of times the guy wasn't even there during the inspection, mm-hmm. if it's a purchase. Right? So I got to read all the MLS information. I got to walk through the whole property. So if the guy's not there, it's in the middle of nowhere in Hagerstown, I'm running around this thing. I mean, what could I miss is a good question, right? And then going and looking at comparable sales, you're not dealing in a perfect environment. You've got 6 to 8 months that you're working with, maybe a year of market data that you're working with. Sometimes you'll have 50 comps. Sometimes you'll have 5. Right? If the house is a unique property, 2, 3 bedrooms, and then add on that, the MLS information's wrong. So a lot of times when I'm doing a search,
and often is,
if I'm doing a search and I put in 3-bedroom comparables or 4-bedroom comparables, well, sometimes people include the basement comparables. So I'll look and I'll see that this house is a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. And in reality, it's a 2-bedroom with 2 bedrooms in the basement because it's a split level, but it appears as a 4-bedroom. Right. So then I gotta go and literally go through, let's say, 100 comparables one by one, and look at and see, okay, is this really a 3-bedroom townhouse, or is it a 2-bedroom townhouse with a basement, or is it really a 3-bedroom but it says 4 because there's 2 in the basement? And my subject is an actual, let's say, 3 or 4 bedroom house. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at the square footage, depending on where you're at, like, so for instance in Montgomery County, if you've got a split level or a split foyer, they include the basement GLA in the overall square footage, and it just says it has no basement. Whereas if I have a colonial, they'll include the first 2 floors as so you just take those concepts and you think, what could go wrong during the data research process?
This is why this is why I hate split level properties.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, you take that and you think, what could go wrong? What could go wrong?
So it doesn't count, right? The bedroom below in a split foyer, it doesn't count.
Correct. It does not. Well, it doesn't count as above GLA square footage, right? So you're dealing with a situation that when you come back to the appraiser, I mean, a lot of times, and to this point, Jason.
And by the way, people don't accept that explanation even after you provide it.
Right. So to that point, Jason, and you need this thing like yesterday.
Yep.
Right? You know what I mean? It's not like you got, a month to do this. You need this thing like yesterday. So I get the appraisal, you need it in 7 days. I call the bar doesn't call me back for a day or 2. I go out and see it, on Monday or Tuesday if it's Friday now. You need it, Thursday, Friday at the latest. So it's Monday, Tuesday, I go out and inspect it. I'm trying to find comparables. Wednesday, you're calling me for an update. Thursday, you expect it. Friday, you're pissed. Mm-hmm. And it's just, there's a lot of things that...
Monday, they're screaming at me.
Monday, they're screaming at Fritz. Yeah. And there's just a lot of little things that could go wrong. And you want to kind of approach it from a perspective of updating information. Assume the best. That it's an honest mistake that he didn't miss, that he couldn't catch that. Because in reality is, you don't have a month to sit there and research this thing. You know?
Right.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
And honestly, if you approach it that way as, hey, listen, you know, it's an opportunity to make a correction, most appraisers are more amenable to it that way. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you've always got to give someone the opportunity to correct their work, you know, especially an appraiser. And they will, and that's the part of it that the other part of it that's relevant and important is that they will make those corrections, provided you can give them the data, because they deal strictly with data. They deal with what do I have in front of me, what can I verify, what can I confirm. Okay, so if you can give them something that they can confirm that's verifiable, they'll run with that. They'll run with that if it's appropriate to do so. So again, you just want to take your best shot first, right? You just want to make sure everything, you know, is as accurate as it can be, and then contact your AMC, and then we'll approach it as, you know, we need to get clarification for the file.
Absolutely,
this is the way to handle it.
All right.
So,
and I think you guys touched on a lot of good points on that one. It was, why does it take so long? Well, there's 50 or 60 properties that were listed incorrectly on Maris, and that took you a long time to go through it. So as a team, the realtor, the appraiser, the lender, the listing agent, the sellers, the buyers, as a team, if everybody were to work together and stop being too busy to answer someone's call or too busy to get back to somebody's email, everybody could prepare a lot better. And if people put a little bit more of professionalism into their job and put some more emotion into it, I think as a whole it would grow. Spend a little more time with your listing. Make sure everything is right. Spend a little more time with prepping your client for all the repairs, cleaning, you know, getting the holes fixed in the wall. As a lender, make sure you're reaching out to the listing agent and talking to them about the property so that they're not wasting time. And just, if everybody works as a team, it will make for a much better buyer and seller experience, and that's how we get referrals to give back more business, you know, to keep our pipelines going.
Absolutely. And, you know, to that point, Jason, realtors, call the appraisers back when they call to verify information. Because a lot of times what I would do, I mean, you know, Jason, let's real life here, right? So I go out and appraise this property in Hagerstown or Frederick, Maryland. I got 10 comparables that I'm kind of looking at. I call the 10 realtors. I send an email to the 10 realtors just verifying for information because it's a rural property and I'm just trying to cross-check, you know, that they own 2 lots or this 1 lot. It said something about a separate lot available when they purchased the property. Was that included in the purchase price? So you don't call me back and I don't have a way of verifying it. I don't use that comp.
Of course you can't.
You know what I mean? That's reality. Real world stuff. I don't use that comp. Right, because the other 4 I could verify that information. That sometimes, right, in practical scenarios, could affect the value. It couldn't, right, because sometimes it's not the case, but sometimes it was, because if I use that comp, and let's say that didn't include the lot, or did include the lot, well, that may now sway a little bit the value a little bit because I have additional market data that I can now use.
Well, right, but really, and at the end of the day, inevitably what will happen there is the client will provide that additional comparable because that lot is included. Yeah. So then they'll come back and they'll say, well, no, either they need they'll ask for, typically it'll be a revision to say, you know, please include, because one, they'll have to include the lot, they'll have to rewrite the report itself to include the lot, so the subject property information has to be rewritten, which then, yes, warrants all new comparables. And where that becomes an issue, it's not an issue to have the appraiser change it. Where it becomes an issue is 2 things. One, if it's a change to an engagement, the appraiser can say that's a new assignment, they want an additional fee, okay, and more importantly and more of a problem is that's going to cause a delay in the process. And like Jason already talked about earlier, hey, I've got 18 business days to get this wrapped up. So we don't have that time to delay. That's what you can't afford, is that delay. Okay, so that's why it's relevant. Make sure that phone call gets answered. Make sure we have that information.
So, Jason, in wrapping up,
And by the way, I just want to say something real quick. Sorry, I'm gonna cut you right off, man. We're way over. It doesn't matter. I want to give Jason.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah, keep it party going.
Look, man. Jason, I want to give you compliments, man. First of all, thank you for hanging with us at the beginning when we had a little bit of a rough start. I appreciate that. And I just want to say also, man, that you really have some great insights on this whole process. I've you'll rewatch the YouTube stream, and you'll see as you're talking, I'm sitting over here nodding my head. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. So you really had some great insights, as I said, into the process and to how to handle things from that side. And really appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think anyone who is either getting their start in the mortgage industry and originating, or even if they've been doing it for a while and maybe they're not having the level of success they'd like, they need to listen to what you're telling them, and they can get a lot of valuable tips and information on how they can be more successful based on what you've shared. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
So Jason, real quick, and thanks that for.
I can go for another 2 hours, man.
There you go.
Well, we're gonna have you.
Passionate about this, so.
You've been a fantastic guest, and we're gonna definitely have you back on, buddy. Definitely.
I appreciate it. So to wrapping up, Jason, 60 seconds, Jason, 60 seconds. Give best tips for loan officers who are trying to build out. This goes all across the country, right? So all across the world, right? We're on YouTube.
We are, and by the way, we're popular in the Netherlands.
Netherlands, there you go. Best
I
tips.
don't know why we
for,
have viewers in the Netherlands.
For loan officers, realtors.
All right. So number one thing, get your database dialed in. Don't tell me you use Agent Image or whatever that thing is, and I say, well, when's your client's birthday, and you don't know when it is. When I say get your database dialed in, know their names, their kids' names, their birthdays, their kids' birthdays, the name of their dog, when their anniversary is. Those are all reasons that you could call, text, email to those clients. Hey, wish little Johnny a happy birthday for me. That goes a long way. Other than, hey, how are you? Can I give you a market analysis? It's just be more personable, build more of a database. And if you've been in the business more than 10 years and you don't have a database, it'll take you a year to build that database. It's going to take you a long time to make up for lost time, but I would stick to it every single day, and then come up with a schedule. Don't wake up Monday morning and wing it. Wake up Monday morning and you're going to do this. Wake up Tuesday morning and do that. Wednesday morning and do this, and have a set schedule so you know exactly what you're doing. And that's going to help you with generating a lot of business and your leads. And realtors and loan officers alike, if you're not keeping track of your leads, the average time on a lead is 6 to 8 months, especially for like a Zillow or Trulia or Redfin or whatever, Realtor.com or something like that. It's 6 to 8 months incubation period. So if you can't tell me the leads that you got 6 to 8 months ago, you better start fixing your database, because those are going to be your clients in 6 to 8 months. So save your data, keep it. Data is the most valuable thing on the planet right now. It's more valuable than oil or anything else. So make sure you have every lead's data, and you'll close a lot more deals. So your is keep the database, plan your day, stay in touch with everybody creatively, right, with your data, and I'm 100% in agreement on that. Oh my God. And then finally, work your ass off, right? Exactly.
Yeah, look, if I'll say it, I'll put it in a quotable.
There you go.
Remember, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Jason and Fritz. Let's close this out.
You're welcome.
Jason, I'm sorry, but go ahead. Get that last point, and I'm not going to cut you off.
You're good, man. I just love helping people, and it's somebody has taught me, and I'm teaching others, and if you can't tell me a lead you got 5 months ago and what happened to it, you better take a look at what you're doing, because somebody else is probably calling them, because you are not the only person that got that lead. So starting today, keep track of it, come up with a plan to stay connected to that person one way or the other, so that you can keep your pipeline full.
Yeah, good point. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show.
Certainly appreciate it. Again, Jason Fox from People's Home Equity. Appreciate him coming on and sharing a lot of good insights for for the folks.
And this will be available on our YouTube pretty soon?
Yeah, this will be up on YouTube. Obviously, you can go ahead and grab it on Blog Talk. We'll be on next week, next Friday, 2 p.m. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, and you should be saying this throughout the broadcast, but I'll remind you again, make sure you go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. You also want to go ahead, if you like what you're hearing, go ahead and hit share as well. Also, check us out on Blog Talk. Make sure you subscribe to us there to get all the updates for what we're doing. We will see you all next week in the Lions Den. Thank you all very much, everybody. Have a great weekend and a safe weekend.
Thank you, Jason.
And enjoy the Super Bowl.
You're welcome. Later, guys. Thanks.
Tip.